through all 7 of them to just explain to the public and also to council what they're voting on here tonight. But 9 out of these 10, I believe, were on the last application. There was one that we have to add in order to be considered for any funding. And this is step 1 of what I consider probably a 3-step process now. So 1 would be application, 2 would be negotiation, and 3 would be acceptance by council once we get to that final stage. But in order to get to that last step, we need the council to consider these initiatives. Considering them does not mean you're approving them tonight. It only means that you're willing to consider them moving forward. And then once the negotiation stage happens, then that's really when the rubber kind of hits the road. So the first one is the implementation of ADU zoning campaign. So recently the City of Miramichi adopted some changes to ADUs and where they can be put in. And what this initiative will allow is for a marketing campaign to explain to the public and those property owners that are interested in adding auxiliary dwelling units, which is what the acronym stands for, to their property. There'll be education programs on, tax implications, what you might want to think about for insurance, other things like that. And we'll be providing that information to the public moving forward now that council has made these adaptations to the zoning bylaw. The second one is an infill housing incentive program. So again, we have some programs right now that allow for developers who are constructing affordable housing units to apply to the City of Miramichi and be reimbursed their building permit fee. And what we're proposing that is in some the areas of the city that already have connecting services that have vacant lots, that if a proposal comes that includes housing, but it does not have to be affordable, that we consider reimbursing the building permit fee for that particular development. Number 3 is the end of the exclusionary zoning. And basically what this means is that any residential property in the City of Miramichi, whether it's R1 to, there's an R6, I believe, but not very commonly used. R1 and R2 would be the one I think that this falls into the most, is that it'd be 4 units as a right on R1 property. Number 4, housing inclusion and regional commercial zoning designation. So the only regional commercial zoning designation that we have in the City of Miramichi is the properties that are around the multiplex, around the Walmart, in that area. That's the one area that we currently have that zoning. But we're not permitting anyone to build residential on those, we see a lot of strip malls. The City of Fredericton recently is trying this, and it seems to be something that could bring housing and labor force together, because a lot of that development is going to require labor force. It's service jobs, and this would allow for the developers to put housing on top, which is currently not permitted in this particular zone. Number 5 is the creation of a workforce incentive program. So that, again, that is very similar to the downtown housing incentive we have right now, and also the affordable housing incentive, where the City of Miramichi provides compensation to developers that build in either the downtown residential catchment area, or provides affordable housing as we define it through CMHC and social development's definitions. This one kind of hits that gap that's not being covered. So as you can see there, the current gap, our current wage gap is at the low end, it's $850 for social development. And what we're seeing is about $1,500 for the market rent. So this would allow for us to administer a program to try to capture developers, or I guess incentivize developers to build that workforce housing in between that pricing gap. Number 6, pre-approved building plans for missing middle and small unit structures. So again, this is a program where we would pre-approve some building plans that would streamline the process at the Planning Commission, so that if these are the plans that the developer intends to use for whether it's an apartment complex or certain types of housing, then they would be already pre-approved on a list, and it could streamline, make the development happen a little bit faster. And finally, number 7 is an integrated housing and infrastructure acceleration incentive policy. It's a lot of words, but basically what it is a program to allow the city of Miramichi to extend service boundaries to areas that make sense to develop further housing. So right now there's a program provincially that we can tap into, but we don't really have a budget to leverage the municipal portion. This particular program would allow us to do that type of stuff. So we could invest in additional infrastructure that will facilitate housing, whether it be affordable or multi-unit or row housing, things like that. So that's what the purpose of that program is. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll entertain any questions, and I'll minimize this. So I had trouble last time, but there we go.
Okay, very good, Director McTavish. Thank you for that. So we do have a motion on the floor from Councillor Placey, seconded by Councillor Summers, and hearing from Director McTavish. Are there any questions on this motion? Councillor Ross Robinson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through yourself to Director McTavish. So how many of these initiatives do we need? All of them?
We are required to submit a minimum of 7, and one of those has to be the ending of the exclusionary zoning. Otherwise, the city of Miramichi, basically what we were told on the phone was, if you don't include that one in your list, don't apply.
Okay, so on that, that would be citywide, that all dwellings that are currently are 1, 2, 3, whatever, could be reworked to be 4-unit housing?
That's correct.
No matter where. And so that would in effect, I'm trying to understand this, so that would in effect undo our requirements that bring people here to get rezonings and whatever to add units to their homes.
That part, for the rezonings, I guess it would matter. It would depend on the circumstances of what they were looking to add, because a lot of that's already taken care of by the Planning Commission. But basically, what this saying is that right now we do have some restrictive zoning, and it's saying that anyone that is not, any zones that do not permit a minimum of 4 units on that zone would be, that's what this would allow for. So if I had a piece of property that was zoned R1, and I may have 3 units right now, so I may have my main level, may have a basement apartment, I might have an auxiliary dwelling unit, but in theory, I would be able to add an extra unit, provided that I've got the size of the property that would could allow for it.
And so approving this tonight means what?
Approving this tonight means that the city or the staff are permitted to submit an application with these initiatives, which then again have to be approved by the Government of Canada, sent back to us in some type of agreement where a negotiation begins, and then if council chooses to enter into that agreement with the Government of Canada, they would provide us with funding to implement our initiatives. But right now it's just a request to send the initiatives into the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation.
So I get it. When we need housing, I understand all of that. But that number 3 is huge. And I think at some point in time, the public may want to weigh in on that. That's huge. I'm not going to object tonight. I'm willing to move this forward, but I would like to revisit that, because I think that is a major change for our city.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, it will come back to this council more than one time, because not only is it if you decide as a council to accept the application and go forward with that change, that requires a change to the zoning bylaw and to the municipal plan, which I believe triggers a public process, if I'm not mistaken. So there will be a process to allow the public to provide concern for that, which will then help form council to make their decision whether it's going. But it doesn't prevent us from signing the agreement. You may at the end decide not to go ahead with that as a council, because you get so much feedback from that's not what your community wants, and at that point you can make the choice whether to cancel that, which may in effect cancel the agreement with the Government of Canada. But anyway, there will be stipulations in the agreement on what the funding will look like and how it's dispersed and how that could affect you. Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Ross Robinson. I see Mayor Lorden has his virtual hand in the air. Mayor Lorden, to you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Quinn. And I just first wanted to clarify, I think a very important piece of what of this initiative number 3 that Mr. Director McTavish didn't mention is that this would pertain to serviced properties in the city only. So it is not a blanket to any area that isn't already connected to city services. So that I think is an important piece of information. I understood that Mr. Forbes, the clerk had informed me, was going to be here tonight participating in this presentation. I guess something came up. Mr. Forbes and Mr. McGraw, of course, had worked really closely through the group and on doing the work and providing some of the important data around this initiative too. So just to share, that's a piece of information around the item. I would speak in favor tonight enthusiastically of submitting this proposal, and then just to clarify a few other things as well. First, on this particular item, a couple of years ago, we made adjustments to the R2 zone that allowed a third unit as a right. So when you look at the city, this is actually, from my perspective, not that significant of a change. There is only a very limited amount of R1 zones in the entire city. That's the one that, yes, would change somewhat significantly, but only if the owners wanted to. If you still want to build one unit on your R1, you can still always do that. And the R2 already allows 3, so it would just go up to 1 additional unit in those cases. But I think more broadly, this is a condition that the federal government is requiring if you are to receive federal accelerator money. And the point I want to highlight that, I guess hopefully I was thinking would have been part of the conversation is if we submit this tonight, what we're asking for is around $15 million in federal funds. And we know that there is a great and urgent need in our community to continue to build housing of all types, especially affordable housing. What's proposed based on the numbers would allow us to, if we were to receive all of it, to increase. We're already at record levels of development. We would now build an additional 250 units if we were able to enact all of these measures with the full $15 million over 3 years. That's going to significantly help us because ultimately we can do more if we have more resources, and we know, as was mentioned, that resources are always a challenge, in particular around the infrastructure pieces. But what will happen is, as we've seen in communities across the country, is we know, practically speaking, we will likely not receive all 15 million, and we'll have to negotiate, as Director McTavish said, with the federal government, ultimately around how much funding we could get, and then how many of these initiatives we would carry forward, or maybe we would do all of them, but at a lesser scale. But all of that comes later. This is just getting it in the door to have a conversation. And we know that we were one of only a few communities in New Brunswick who didn't receive money, who applied for it in the first round. And there is, of that $400 million additional funding, allotments for each province. So I feel optimistic that we will be engaged in a negotiation, and this is a critical step of providing resources and some good policy too, to allow us to further our efforts on our single biggest challenge in the community in recent years and in the years ahead. So I'm in favor of tonight and look forward to playing through the process. We know that there'll be multiple phases and stages, but I look at this as a significant opportunity to improve better facilitation of more housing faster in our community, and that's what it's all about.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Lord. In the interest of clarity, we do have Mr. Forbes here from the Miramichi Housing Authority. Mr. Forbes, if you'd care to weigh in, you feel free to do so.
Yeah, if that's the case, Deputy Mayor Quinn, to clarify, maybe he could highlight the specific dollar amount and the number of units. I think I was close, but he would have the exact numbers.
Very good, Mr. Forbes. You've been invited.
Thanks for that. So just to speak to the item around the exclusionary zoning, I just wanted to confirm that based on the discussion with the working group, it would apply to those serviceable areas. With respect to the total number of Housing Accelerator funding incented units and the total ask, so in the initial application, round one, the unit count estimate was 449 over 3 years, so 449 half-incented units. And under the round two application, we're estimating 543. So the total application value is going from 13.8 million to 16.8 million. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Forbes, thank you for that point of clarification. Any further questions from colleagues? Councillor DePlacy.
Yeah, as the mayor alluded to, we were skipped on the first round. And I just noticed today that Riverview is announcing their program, so I know that's always a community that we kind of hold ourselves in comparison to. And so I think, yeah, there's no need for us to kind of hold up this process. There's lots of time to negotiate and work within our bylaws to get this right and consult community. So happy to send this forward at this point and look forward to further discussions.
Okay, Councillor DePlacy, thank you. Any further? All right, and seeing none, I'll call that to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. To the contrary? That motion is carried. Thank you. It's a good conversation there. We'll move on.